We're joined today by Steve Milner of Gentoo Fund Services, Howard Weiss of Castle Harlan, and Cameron Hillier of MatlinPatterson. Gentlemen, welcome to PrivCap today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks, David.
We are talking about the growing importance of LP awareness of the back office and all the functions that feed into the back office. Whereas, 10 or 15 years ago, maybe people didn't have too many questions. Now, according to all of you, they have a lot of questions, and GP should have the right answers to these questions. So why don't we talk a bit about that, and maybe starting with a question for Cameron. At your firm, MatlinPatterson, what are some signs you're seeing that LPs are increasingly interested in? Obviously, returns come first, but after that, just the infrastructure that helps the firm run efficiently.
Yeah, well, so I think the growth in the alternatives business in itself, and couple that with much more regulation, it's really forcing GPs to upgrade and sort of recontemplate their entire operating infrastructure. So I think you point out correctly that returns are still the number one consideration, but other considerations like the infrastructure, the culture, the governance, the transparency, they're no longer just purely secondary considerations.
And Howard, at your firm, have you seen LPs express greater interest in wanting to be up to date on what you're doing and what your team is doing as the CFO of the firm?
Well, I think the answer is yes, but they do it by asking us for information and more information and every kind of information that you could possibly want. And part of it is also matching our information to what they have. They're very concerned, as Cameron mentioned, about returns. And very often they'll challenge us in terms of what we've issued, and we have this tendency to try to get their information and ask them to allow us to go through, and we match everything up to show them exactly what the issue might be. So I can't say that they're going to call us up and say, well, what software program are you using? But they want to know what their capital accounts look like. They want to know their waterfalls. They want to know their IRRs. And that's how they learn what goes on in our back office.
Steve, you oversee basically the back office on an outsourced basis for many GP clients. Have you noticed that there's an increasing interest among investors in particular about the integrity of those systems, and do they come to you and try to get information from you?
It's actually quite interesting. So we get a little different perspective as just being the third-party provider in the back office. So if we get questions, they're only about the back office and not about the investment philosophy or returns. And so we've been doing this for the better part of 20 years. And what's really interesting, especially over the last 5 years, for the first 15 years, an LP never, and I will tell you, never visited our offices. In the last 5 years, we have a steady stream of LPs coming to our offices. They want to take a look around, make sure we have a disaster recovery plan, a business continuity plan, that there's really an office there. They want to view us. We've established a whole due diligence binder where they look at our processes, our controls. This is something that's much more recent. I would say in the last 5 years. We have a steady stream, especially when our clients are out marketing a fund as part of operational due diligence. We're getting paid site visits. The other thing that we're seeing, again, more associated with the fundraising effort is, the questionnaires, the due diligence that the prospective LPs are placing on the GPs. Part of that now is a couple of pages about back office stuff. Again, business continuity, disaster recovery, escalation policies, and things like that. And so we're asked on behalf of our clients to complete those sections of the questionnaires. So that's, again, something new that we didn't see, 10 years ago. We didn't see that type of thing occur.
And Cameron, in talking about kind of due diligence and questionnaires and things like that, is it the case, have you noticed at your firm that those categories that perhaps 5 to 10 years ago no one was paying attention to are now things that you're having to fill out a form for?
Yeah, I'd say there's two major changes that I really have seen over the past few years, and I think you see it. We talked earlier about the hedge fund sort of side leading the charge there, but we're seeing more of this on the private equity side. Is first of all, I think you've got a lot more people who are dedicated operational due diligence people. I think there used to be just one team that would cover everything. They would do the investment returns and they'd ask the back office a couple of questions. Well, now you've got sort of dedicated people who are very experienced in that regard, and they get to play off sort of best practices and what's appropriate for a firm of a particular size. And secondly, you're seeing things like ILPA trying to bring out sort of best practices around DDQs. And I wouldn't say there's sort of widespread adoption of that in the industry at this point, but it's a slowly sort of evolving process that people are moving more to that standardization that makes everything efficient for everyone, really.
I mean, what would a experienced investor or someone advising an investor discover about the infrastructure of a firm that would raise a red flag or cause them to worry? I mean, what would be delinquent or missing that would cause concern?
I think the inability to answer a question. I think they're going to request certain information, and your responsiveness and the accuracy and your understanding and your ability to communicate it. That's going to tell them a lot. Again, will they decide to try to find out how you did it? I don't think they're as concerned about that as they are about the information that they're learning.
Yeah, I think primarily an LP wants to have confidence that the information that they're getting is reliable and that it's accurate and also that it's timely, because they have their own constituency, their own stakeholders who they need to report to, whether you're an endowment or a pension plan. But I'll give you one anecdotally. So I was invited in on behalf of a client to sit in on a due diligence meeting operationally at the client's offices, and they went through their checklist. And one of the questions they asked of the CFO was, who can sign off on moving money, wiring money? And so in our organization, we tee things up for execution, but we don't have signatory authority. And in this particular case, the CFO could wire any amount of money, without another signature. And the LP said, we require 2 signatures over a certain amount of money in order for us to invest. So in that particular instance, the LP was actually mandating that the GP would have to modify their processes in order to accept the investment.
Steve, I think your example there is a testament to the fact that LPs now have a view on what constitutes best practices, as where I think if you look back in a number of years, they wouldn't have a view because they wouldn't have seen what people do well, what people don't do well, and you've got to adjust your infrastructure to the size and scale of the firm. But the LPs have a real view on this now, as I'd say historically, there hasn't been that level of scrutiny. So it's a good example.
The other thing I think that's happened, David, that's affected what we all do together is the investors have become more sophisticated and they're more global. So today we see sovereign wealth funds investing in a lot of our clients. They've got a very intricate structure. Maybe it was geared for regulatory considerations or tax considerations. But if you look at a structure of a private equity fund today and the level of complexity, the number of legal entities, yes, the number of jurisdictions that are being used to facilitate an investment, that has added a whole level of complexity that never existed before. And almost all of that is being driven by LPs, either, again, for regulatory or tax purposes. And it's just layering on to what had been a fairly simple structure to make it fairly complicated.
Do you think that LPs are looking for signs that there is buy-in from the top leadership of the firm as far as the integrity of the back office? And do you think there are founders out there who maybe, without doing so overtly, kind of shrug their shoulders a little bit and say, come on, does all this stuff really matter?
Well, I think it's a critical consideration from an LP's perspective. I just don't think, if you don't have, look, the tone is set at the top of an organization, no matter what organization it is, and if there's not a discipline around compliance and respect for the organization's values, words aren't going to mean anything. It's really about sort of follow through. So I think that starts at the top, but also I think you've got to have that next senior level of management, your CFO, your CCO, your COO, have sort of requisite authority and responsibility to follow through on those. What's written in your respective policies.
And I think Cameron's right on. I mean, if your senior people have the respect and they buy into it, it's just going to be a reflection down to the next level and the one after that. And your professionals will know that they've got to do it also. And that is key to the success of the back office, because it doesn't become a back office then. It becomes part of the front office also.
Steve, you have an interesting view of an indicator of what the future of private equity will be by looking at another asset class on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, so I've been a student of and a practitioner in the private equity space for almost 25 years now. And what I've learned over time is if I watch what's happened initially in mutual funds, and then I watch hedge funds, then I watch my private equity business, because the way I analogize it is that the public equities are the older brother or the older sister, the hedge funds are the middle child, and we, the private equity, the younger folks. And so if you look at what's happened in the world, whether it's requiring a chief compliance officer, that initially happened in 40 Act mutual funds. It then moved on to private equity, and now we have that in hedge funds. If you look at registration, 40 Act registration for investment advisors, same thing happened. If you look at even functionally how we distribute information, my partners and I actually founded the first firm that did electronic communication, private equity information through a portal. We did that because we saw what the hedge funds were doing, and we said, you know, why shouldn't private equity funds be able to distribute capital calls, K-1s, financial statements electronically? And we did that in response to what we saw hedge funds doing. And so we've always looked at what happens in those asset classes and said, it's going to happen in the PE space. Can't tell you when, but we know it's going to happen. And it's a very good indicator.
You know, with the flows, with the capital flows, I think on the hedge fund side, you're really starting to see a real movement of retail money into hedge funds.
And of course, your firm has hedge funds.
We have a number of hedge fund strategies. So seeing a lot of flows in these 1940 Act funds, and retail flows really flowing into that. And I think it's only a matter of time before you start seeing private equity starting to attract retail flows as well. So it's not quite there yet, but I think to your point in terms of the evolution of the business, we need to be prepared for that.
Gentoo is a third-party private equity administrator. And basically what we do is we work with private equity funds to support their back office specifically. We're the folks who take care of reporting to investors, whether that be financial statements, capital calls, distributions. We keep the accounting books and records for the firm, the official records of the firm. We maintain the investor database. We're the folks who do the allocations. We can prepare, and oftentimes do prepare, the waterfall calculations. And we support, in most cases, the CFO or the person within the organization who's responsible for these things. So we bring a platform of people, process, and technology, and we bring that to our clients.